This is volume 2, where we're looking at battles 4, 5 and 6 as the Abyssals advance towards the harbour. Forces involved: the Orcs and Goblins are defending the islands with an Orc fleet, a Goblin army, and they've recruited an Ogre warband for the Vanguard battles. And the Forces of the Abyss are attacking and have got a captured Basilian fleet that they're using, an Abyssal army and warband for the battles on land. And this is volume 2, looking at the advanced battles 4, 5 and 6. Situation after the first 3 battles is the Abyssals won Armada battle 1, the Ogres on behalf of the Goblins won Vanguard battle 2, and the Abyssals won the Kings of War battle 3, which secured the key crossroads. The Abyssals are now advancing south towards the harbour, with Goblins retreating before them to establish a new blocking position to prevent the advance. However, Goblin forces in the north have been cut off and are awaiting evacuation by the Orc fleet. So Battle 4 is Armada, Storm of Magic. Now, a revival of a magical vortex has forced both fleets to move away from land in order to find sea room to ride out the storm and to attempt to capture magical energy flowing from the storm. Unbeknownst to them, however, both fleets have navigated to the same area and a confrontation is inevitable. As a result of having to send troop ships to evacuate the Goblin army that's been cut off by the Abyssal land advance, the Orc fleet starts with 10% fewer points than the Abyssals. So the Abyssals will select a fleet to 250 points and the Orcs to 225 points. Scenario used is the Vortex from the Armada rulebook, except that victory point counters are assigned to the ship that gained them, which is different to the scenario in the book. If a ship surrenders or is destroyed as a result of a boarding action, the enemy ship captures all the victory point counters the ship had. If a ship is destroyed or surrenders or has left the battle in the final turn, all victory point counters on it are lost. Victory points are gained by sailing close to the vortex, but vessels too close run the risk of being sucked into the vortex and destroyed. The outcome of this battle will impact on Battle 6. Depending on how much magical energy is captured by the fleets, they will have additional magical upgrades that they can deploy in Battle 6, which will be the Kings of War battle. And there will be an impact on Battle 7 in the fleet that suffered with fewer points of shipping destroyed by enemy action, or the Vortex in this battle will have more ships to field in Battle 7, the next Armada battle, and that fleet may deploy 2 additional squadrons with regular crews. So here's the terrain, and you can see there's 4 sandbars there, and there's a vortex in the middle of the board. And there's the forces. The Abyssals have 250 points. Cursed Abbess, boarding nets, Ogre mercenaries, sturdy construction, veteran crew. 3 cursed Elohai, all with boarding nets, Ogre mercenaries, veteran crew. Cursed Ger Panther, boarding nets, veteran crew. Another cursed Ger Panther with a veteran crew, and 2 cursed sloop squadrons. And the Orcs have got a Smasher with Morax, Sails, Honey Maze, Grappling Hook, veteran crew. 2 Hammer Fists, Morax, Grappling Hooks, veteran crew. Bloodrunner, Ogre mercenaries, boarding nets, grappling hooks, veteran crew. And another Bloodrunner, Ogre mercenaries, boarding nets and veteran crew. Issues. Both fleets felt there was limited value with small and tiny ships in the scenario. There was also risk in having too many points invested in ships if they're going to get sucked into the vortex. And this is different to the rule book scenario in that there's benefit of boarding ships to capture their victory points under the modified scenario rules, and that might represent a benefit to the Orcs, which is why the Abyssals have adopted counter boarding measures. And one thing, the tactics used in this battle were dreamt up by those involved. Caution should be exercised if you're trying to replicate these extremely unorthodox tactics in your own games. You have been warned. So there's the deployment with the Orcs at the top and the Abyssals at the bottom. So in turn 1, there's a general advance, minor damage from long range shooting, but really just setting the scene for what's going to happen next. Ships collect victory points but take minor damage from the vortex. Wind direction changes at the start of turn 2. And remember, the presence of a vortex means that if the wind does not change direction at the start of a turn, the dice must be re-rolled. So there's an increased chance that the wind will change at the start of each turn. Captain of an Abyssal Cursed Elohai believes best form of defensive attack heads straight through the heart of the Orc fleet, badly damaging the Orc Smasher with a critical hit and damaging a Hammer Fist with its other broadside. In retaliation, the Orcs waste no time in boarding 2 of the Abyssal ships. The Smasher forces 1 Abyssal ship to surrender as everyone carries on fighting. The Orc Hammer Fist, that was badly damaged from shooting, decides to deal with as many Abyssals as possible before it sinks. It rams the Abyssal flagship, unfortunately only inflicting 4 damage on the flagship while taking 11 itself. The Orcs redeem themselves in hand-to-hand combat, but the outcome was inevitable and the Hammer Fist surrenders. The other Hammer Fist passes the grappled ships and succeeds in its skill test to shoot into the ships, causing heavy damage that is shared between the 2 ships. The damaged Hammer Fist is now full of holes, it's only remaining afloat because it's tied up alongside the Cursed Abbess. And at the end of a turn, carnage ensues and the invasive vortex sucks ships towards it. The grappled Hammer Fist breaks free from the Abbess, but without its support promptly sinks. Elsewhere there are multiple collisions and horrendous damage. In the congested waters, at the start of turn 3, the Low-High Squadron moves out of the way and puts some damage onto a Blood Runner. Blood Runner, its turn, follows up a broadside by grappling a Gur Panther and forcing it to surrender. Cursed Abbess takes out its frustrations with broadside into the other Blood Runner, which sinks it. The Orc flagship has to manoeuvre carefully, but manages to grapple a damaged Cursed Low-High and forces that to surrender. And the situation at the end of turn 3, in the north, you can see an Abyssal Low-High and a Gur Panther, which have changed to full speed to attack with the wind to get back into action, having sailed past the Orc fleet and also taking the opportunity to repair damage. Near a vortex, more victory points are gained by the ships close to it and more damage inflicted by the vortex. Turn 4 starts with change of wind direction. Orc Smasher breaks free of the surrendered Low-High and tries to shoot at the Abyssal Cursed Abbess. Unfortunately, it fails its skill test and has instead to engage the nearest target, the Low-High, and sinks it. And we played that incorrectly, in fact, because surrendered ships and squadrons can be ignored for targeting purposes, and the Smasher could have been able to target the Abbess. Near a vortex, a captain remaining Orc Blood Runner sees the chance to implement a cunning trick and ensure immortal glory. At the end of a previous turn, the Abyssal flagship had been dragged perilously close to the vortex, but it was travelling at battle speed, so would be able to get well away in its own activation. However, the Orc pulled alongside and grappled the Cursed Abbess. It was a suicide mission, as the Abbess's crew was more than enough to deal with a smaller ship, but the Abbess would be forced to anchor within striking distance of the vortex itself. There's a situation after a grapple before the Abbess's activation. The Abbess was forced to anchor during the grapple, and its own activation, it could not only travel at steady speed, was in range of a vortex, and was sucked into the vortex and destroyed. Turn 5 started with wind remaining static, but with few ships remaining on both sides. Gur Panther attempted to get into position for a stern rake on the Orc Smasher, but after several attempts at the manoeuvre could not quite manage it, ending up having to settle for only introducing 6 damage on the ship. The badly damaged Smasher elected to carry out a repair action, but only rolled a 1, meaning that 5 damage could be repaired. Hammer Fist pulls alongside the Gur Panther and attempts to board it to steal the victory points. Unfortunately, it fails the skill roll and the reroll, the Orc reroll. And here we are going into turn 6. The Orcs have a stronger fleet remaining, but the Abyssals have more victory points, with 17 to the Orcs' 16. Hammer Fist makes no mistake this time and boards a Gur Panther and forces it to surrender. In the forlorn hope, the remaining Cursed Low-High fires a broadside into the Orc flagship, hoping to achieve a critical hit and set it on fire. It does get a critical hit, but fails to cause a blaze, rolling a 9 when an 11 or 12 would have been required. And the situation at the end of turn 6. In its turn, the badly damaged Smasher carried out another repair action, a bit more successfully than in the previous turn. Start of turn 7, the Orc Smasher activated first, decided repairing was not very orky, tried to sink the Cursed Low-High. The Orc gunnery was particularly bad, only hitting with 2 shots, but at least getting a critical hit. The Low-High raced away from a Smasher and tried to shoot at the Blood Runner, but failed its skill test to shoot into a grapple. The Blood Runner broke the grapple with the Gur Panther, as automatically breaks as the Panther surrendered. and the Blood Runner did not need to roll a skill test to fire from more distant low high, hitting it twice with another critical. In the situation at the end of turn 7, having captured the victory points from the Cursed Gurpanther, the Orcs are now well on top in victory points. The Abyssals will still now try to maximise the number of victory points on their ships and avoid the Orc gunfire. Into turn 8, the Orc Smasher fires at long range into Cursed Alohi, more hits and another critical, which took the damage above the Alohi's nerve. In its activation, the Alohi had to take a nerve test, which it passed. The Cursed Alohi fired into the Hammer Fist, but failed to inflict serious damage. And the Hammer Fist retaliates with a Bow Rake, which sinks the Alohi. In the situation at the end of a battle, not many ships left afloat. The Orcs have 19 victory points and the Abyssals have 10 victory points. And there's the damaged ships. The ship repair yards are going to be busy fixing that lot. So the Battle 4 outcome, the impact on Battle 6, magical energy captured during the battle. The Abyssals captured 10 victory points, so they'll get 1 magical upgrade. The Orcs will get 2 upgrades, and they can choose between Banechant, Mind Fog, Fireball, Lightning Bolt and Wind Blast, which they will get for 3 in Battle 6. And the fleet suffered the fewer points of shipping destroyed by enemy action was the Orcs, and they will therefore gain 2 squadrons in Battle 7. So thoughts? Having considered tiny and small ships to have limited value in the scenario, it was actually the Abyssal squadrons that gained all of their victory points. So maybe need to rethink that. Some cunning Orc tactics, particularly when trapping the Abyssal flagship near the vortex. Excuse me. The great advantage that Orcs have in this modified scenario being able to board enemy ships and capture their victory points. Boarding nets had little impact on the battle when the Orc could re-roll their grappling attempts. And one thing, oars and engines would offer significant advantage when manoeuvring near the vortex, and so those ships with engines such as the Dwarves and those fleets with oars should do quite well. Right, moving on to Battle 5, Vanguard, Disrupt the Retreat. Situation and forces. Having withdrawn from the landing beaches at the end of the Kings of War Battle 3, in the face of strong Abyssal presence, the Goblin army is retreating to a prepared defensive position, protected during its retreat by the Ogre mercenary warband. In order to harry the enemy, the Abyssal army has infiltrated a warband to harass and delay retreating forces. Scenario used is to destroy the baggage train from the Vanguard rulebook. The Ogre warband is the defender, and the Abyssal warband is the attacker. Baggage train represents the retreating unit's equipment, but has been protected by the Ogre mercenary warband. Abyssals are trying to destroy the baggage train. There are 3 wagons, each have armour 4+, and the Abyssals score 1 victory point for each point of damage on a wagon, and 2 victory points for each wagon completely destroyed after taking 6 wounds. The Ogres score 1 victory point for each full 10 points of Abyssals killed. So the first side to reach 12 victory points at the end of a round wins the battle. And the Battle 5 outcome, there's an impact on Battle 6. If the Ogre warband wins, the unit manages to deliver the equipment to the safety of defensive position, and the Goblin army may have an additional 75 points of units or upgrades. And if the Abyssals win, but the warband's captured the significant quantity of equipment, Battle 6, the Abyssal army may deploy an additional 75 points of upgrades, not units. Forces, the Abyssals with 200 points. And they were glad to be allowed to have flyers and cavalry in this scenario. 2 Abyssal Guards, 2 Flame Bearers, and a lower Abyssal with a Spear, Hellquin Blood Mask, Lucky Charm and Healing Herbs, Seductress, Heavy Weapon and Lucky Charm, Gargoyle, Potion of Haste and Wicked Dagger, and a Hellhound. And the Abyssals believe this scenario favours them as they are attacking. And the Ogres, 2 Cleavers, a Hunter, 2 Berserker Braves, 2 Crocodogs, Boomer Sergeant and an Ogre Sergeant. And as in the first game, where the first issue is there's not very many of them, and they concentrated in building this on the strength of a warband rather than lots of expensive magic items. That's battlefield setup with the 3 wagons in place. And there's the Ogre deployment. Plan to cover likely avenues of approach, and their plan is to charge the enemy before they can get close to the convoy. and the defenders there have to deploy completely before the attackers deploy. And there's the Abyssal deployment, and their plan is to charge the Hellquinn and the Seductress into the rear wagon to get as many victory points as quickly as possible. The Flame Bearers at the top of the board there to move and to shoot the second wagon, and the Gargoyle and the Hellhound to set up deceptively and then aim using their higher speed to sneak round the flank and attack the lead wagon. And there's a reserve force with the Abyssal Warriors, the Lower Abyssal and the Imps to support the Hellquinn and Seductress at the rear of the wagon train. Turn 1, Abyssals get the initiative and charge immediately into the rear wagon. An impressive attacking display, they cause wounds required to destroy the wagon. So they get 6 wounds and then an extra 2 for destroying them. So immediately they've got 8 victory points in the very first turn of the game. There's going to be an uphill struggle for the Ogres. Ogre Sergeant charges out and kills an Abyssal Guard. That'll be 14 points, which gives them 1.4 victory points. Ogre Cleaver hits the lightly wounded Seductress and knocks her to the floor. The Vicious Crocodile charges into Hellquinn Blood Mask and inflicts a number of wounds that you might expect. Absolutely none. Abyssal Reserve charges the isolated Ogre Sergeant, and with some fluky dice rolling, they down him and then watch as he fails his nerve roll. And the situation at the end of turn 1. At the top of the battlefield, the Flame Bearers are moving into position, but are concerned by the Ogre Boomer Sergeant. On the right, the Gargoyle and Hellhound have wrong-footed the Ogres and started their flanking move. And the victory points is 8 for the Abyssals and 1.4 for the Ogres. Turn 2 starts with the Cleaver giving a good kicking to the prone Seductress and killing her, earning a massive 4.9 victory points. Flame Bearers commence their suicide mission, moving into charge range of the Ogre Boomer Sergeant and flaming the central wagon, causing 1 wound. Berserker Brave charges the Hellhounds and inflicts 2 wounds with his crushing strength. Hound will need to roll armor save of 6+. His days look numbered and he then rolls 2 8s. It looks like it's not the Ogre's day. The Berserker Brave charges the Hellquinn, gaining a useful outnumbering bonus from a Crocodile and inflicts a wound. This charge has brought him into range of the Abyssal Reserve Force, fresh from disposing of the Ogre Sergeant. The Abyssal Guard had an abysmal dice roll to hit, but the Imps make up for it and manage to knock the Ogre down. The Ogre Boomer Sergeant charges and kills one of the Flame Bearers. That's another 0.9 victory points. And the situation at the end of turn 2. On the right there, the Gargoyle has moved into position. The right being the top of the board in this reverse photograph. The Gargoyle has moved into position for a charge on the leading wagon, where the Hunter is well positioned to charge it in his turn. And the victory points are 9 to the Abyssals, Ogres 7.2. Gargoyle charges in and inflicts 1 wound to the leading wagon. Boomer Sergeant disposes of the last Flame Bearer, so that's another 0.9 victory points for the Ogres. Hellquinn uses his healing herbs to remove the wound he'd previously suffered and then dispatches the recumbent Berserker Bully. And importantly, this frees up the Abyssal Reserve Force to move and charge elsewhere. Cleaver charges for Hellquinn and inflicts 1 wound. Hellquinn does not retaliate, saving his power dice for a later threat. The freed up Abyssal Reserve Force charges into Central Wagon and cause 2 wounds. The Abyssals have now amassed 12 victory points and will win the battle at the end of his turn, unless the Ogres can somehow gain another 3.9 victory points. This means killing 39 points of Abyssals, and as an example, the Hellquinn cost 46 points, so this is not going to be an easy task. In front of a convoy, the Hunter charges into the Gargoyle and kills it. That's another 2.1 victory points. Second Cleaver charges into the Hellquinn Blood Mask. Even though it's an outnumbering bonus, it fails to inflict any more wounds on the Abyssal, which retaliates and puts 2 wounds onto the Ogre. The battle between the Berserker Bully and the Hellhound rumbles on, with the Hellhound taking a wound but still standing. So at the end of turn 3, the Abyssals have 12 victory points to the Ogres 10.2 victory points, and it's a win to the Abyssals. outcome has an impact on Battle 6. The Abyssals win, and therefore will have an extra 75 points of upgrades in Kings of War Battle 6. Thoughts? Abyssals really benefited from having their flyers and cavalry. Speed and manoeuvrability were critical in this scenario. And I think the scenario favoured the Abyssals attacking. They destroyed one wagon, earning 8 victory points in the opening move. And was simply something the ogres could not recover from. And so we move on to Battle 6, the Kings of War battle, which is delay the enemy. And the situation is the Goblin army is retreating before the Abyssals. Has now turned to face them on the last piece of defensible land before the harbour. Every hour the enemy is delayed allows more preparation for defence of the harbour. The Abyssals have moved forward and they attack at once without mounting reconnaissance of the ground, but secure the knowledge that further reserve units are marching behind them will be able to join the battle in later stages. Speed here is of the essence to the Abyssals. So let's look at how previous battles will impact on this one. Well, the first one is from Battle 3 outcome. The Goblin army has less time to prepare defensive positions as a result of losing to the Abyssals in Battle 3. From Battle 4, the magical energy captured during the Vortex, the Abyssals will have 1 magical upgrade and the Orcs get 2 upgrades for free. And the Abyssals won Battle 5 and captured equipment off 3 Goblins, and they get an additional 75 points of magical upgrades to their units, which they will not have to pay for. So the Abyssal army selects units as normal. Goblin army selects units to points level 30% less than the Abyssal army. So we're playing with 2,000 points for the Abyssals and 1,400 for the Goblins. Both sides include a magical upgrade granted at the end of Battle 4, which is 1 to the Abyssals and 2 to the Goblins. And additionally, we take into account the charges to force as a result of the outcome of Battle 5, which means that the Abyssals will get an extra 75 points of upgrades. Now, in addition to its normal forces, the Goblin army has 3 4-inch long wall sections they can deploy to help delay the enemy. Had they won or drawn Battle 3, they would have had an additional 3 wall sections, but they didn't win that, and therefore they will not get the additional wall sections. Now, in the actual scenario, it says you can't deploy those walls on the road, but we decided the Goblins are at such a disadvantage, we would allow them to deploy in this particular circumstance. And so on to the forces. The Abyssals with 2,000 points. 2 Moloch hordes with upgrades, 2 Abyssal horseman regiments with upgrades, a Cronius, an Archfiend of the Abyss, a Manifestation of Baal, Hellquin Blood Mask, and another Hellquin Blood Mask with the Inspiring Talisman. And that Hellquin with the Inspiring Talisman has the free upgrade of the Bane Chant 2. And it was decided here they needed 2 fast, hard-hitting forces, only 2 flying units, but any unit that dies is recycled at the top of the Abyssal's deployment zone at the start of the following turn. And so they want to run forward as fast as they can. Doesn't matter if they die so much, because they can be recycled and come back and fight again. And there we are with the Abyssal force. And there's the Archfiend. And he's got invisible wings there. Obviously he flies for some sort of levitation process. And the Goblins, 1,400 points. 3 Sharpstick hordes. Big Rock Thrower, Morpup Launcher, King on Chariot, a Whiz, who's got the Lightning Bolt, is a free upgrade from winning a previous battle. And he's got Gorp's Explodomatic Bang Sticks. And the King there has got the Bane Chant 2 as a free upgrade. And both Fleabag regiments have got magic items which will enable them to move through terrain. So the issues behind the Goblin force: first of all, we're expecting the enemy to field fast forces of cavalry and flyers, and therefore the phalanx from the sharp sticks should be useful. And the plan is to sit behind the phalanx units and shoot, although at 1,400 points they can only have 1 of each war engine, so a big rock thrower and a Morpup launcher. And the goblins know they're going to lose this fight over time. They just need to delay the enemy for as long as they can. And so the sharpstick hordes will hopefully hold the enemy up. You've got the explodamatics to try and maybe then get into flanks and defeat the enemy, and a bit of shooting to try and catch the enemy as well. And there's a goblin force, and as you can see we've got a rock lobber doubling as a pup launcher. There's a scenario. There's 3 pillage markers. The abyssals come on from the north and the goblins deploy in the south. The game lasts until the abyssal army has control of all 3 markers. The abyssal army units that are routed may re-enter play at the start of the following turn. Because the abyssals have not conducted detailed reconnaissance, the next position of the goblin unit is unknown, and to represent this, when the unit has been deployed and before scout moves, the goblin army may redeploy up to D3+1 units anywhere within its deployment zone, and it may also place its defensive wall sections anywhere within the southern half of the board. And I say the scenario itself does say not on the road, but we decided we would allow them to, as they are at quite a disadvantage here. And there's the battlefield we're going to be fighting on, and you can see the 3 markers, one in the middle and then the 2 on the southern edge of the battlefield in the middle of the road. Here's the picture after deployment and after the goblin redeployment moves and the placement of the goblin barriers. You can see there's one in the road, one on the right and one in the left protecting the rock lobbers on a hill on the left. Goblin plan to sit back, encourage the enemy flyers and cavalry onto the sharp sticks with phalanx and then kill them with counter moves by the mobile elements. Obstacles there to delay the enemy, hopefully in killing zones. War engines there to cause some casualties, but mostly to act as a decoy to attract enemy units away from the scoring zones. The abyssals intend to charge down the middle of the road with flanking forces on both sides. Turn 1. The abyssals gain the initiative and advance. On the left, the Helquin Bloodmask advances, and his job is to try and destroy the war engines. Bale puts 2 lightning bolt wounds onto the left-hand horde of sharpsticks. On the right, deciding that attack is the best form of defence, in the goblins' turn they throw their plan out the window, and a regiment of bang sticks charges into the abyssal horsemen. The king has moved so the regiment does not become hindered, completely forgetting that they have Jess's boots, and he needn't have carried out that manoeuvre. In the centre, the right horde of sharpsticks manoeuvres protect the flank of the other horde. Not be outdone by their colleagues on the right flank, the mobile elements on the left also charge in. The sharpsticks manoeuvre to shield the war engines from the Helquin. Goblin shooting and lightning bolts are concentrated on cavalry held up by the obstacle on the road, unfortunately only causing 2 wounds, and then rolling a double 6 to waver them. So that's quite a good result. Bang sticks on the right are bane chanted, and supported by the Maw Pups, they do a serious number on abyssal riders and manage to rout them and redeploy to face the Archfiend. On the left, things do not go so well. 10 wounds are inflicted on the Molochs, but they shrug off the damage. And the situation at the end of turn 1, on the left, the goblins are in a bit of trouble as the Molochs will be able to countercharge, and Bale's over there as well. In the centre, that wavered unit of horsemen is really quite lucky for goblins. It's really holding up the abyssal advance now as everybody is stuck behind it. You can see at the top there, the abyssal horsemen who were routed at the end of turn 1 will come back on at the start of turn 2 to reinforce the abyssals. And on the right, you can see where the Archfiend is now looking into the goblins, but has got the bang sticks in his flank at the moment. So turn 2, Archfiend decides to charge into the bang sticks. Helquin snurgles further round behind the enemy lines to try to get into the war engines. In the centre, Macronius bypasses the roadblock and stares menacingly at the Sharpsticks. Bale charges into the king on chariot, and the Molochs countercharge the Bangsticks. The routed Abyssal Riders are revived and join the traffic jam on the road. In the display of poor dice rolling, the Archfiend only adds 4 wounds to the Bangsticks and only manages to waver them. And that was unexpected and leaves the Archfiend in a poor position. On the other flank, the Molochs regenerate some wounds, then go to work on the Bangsticks and rout them. But Bale only manages to put 3 wounds onto the king on chariot. In the Goblins' turn, the Sharpsticks charge the flank of the Archfiend. They'll double their attacks, but will be hindered. But if they can be Bane chanted and their more pups do some useful work, they might worry the brute. On the left, the king on chariot decides he doesn't fancy the odds and gets away from the Bale and the Molochs and gets out of their charge arc. In the centre, lightning strikes twice. The Abyssal Riders take 3 more wounds and are wavered again. So it really is going well for the Goblins. Unlike the Archfiend the previous round, the Sharpsticks roll like demons and inflict an unlikely 13 wounds on it and proceed to rout it. The Archfiend will come back into the battle in the next round, hopefully hanging his head in shame, having died to Goblins. The situation at the end of turn 2, you can see on the left the Molochs and Bale now moving in position to move forward. The road traffic jam in the road continues with the wavered horsemen, although Macronius is now clear of that, having bypassed it. And on the right, the Goblins have killed the foes they're up against, have now turned round and are facing back towards the road, which will give them potentially flank and rear charges on those Abyssal units on the road. It's turn 3. Fill up of war engines, wavering cavalry, Bale and the Hellquin each charge 1 of the machines. Macronius charges the centre Sharpsticks. Disgraced Archfiend flies forward, having come on again at the start of that turn to threaten the rear of the Bangsticks. Both war engines are routed. Macronius puts 7 wounds onto the Sharpsticks on the road. In the Goblins' turn, the badly damaged Bangsticks charge the flank of Macronius as the Sharpsticks countercharge, and the right Sharpsticks turn to face the Archfiend. On the left, the king on chariot charges the Hellquin, and the Sharpsticks mount a hindered charge into the Molochs. Molochs were already previously badly damaged, and this might be enough to see them off. King on chariot puts 2 wounds onto the Hellquin, not bothered by that. Sharpsticks get the Molochs up to 14 wounds and then rout them and reform to face the main action. In the centre, Macronius takes a beating with the flank charge and is routed. Over at the end of turn 3, the Abyssals have taken a surprising beating for the Goblins. The Goblins themselves have suffered, and there is a never-ending supply of Abyssals. And you see at the top there, the Molochs and Macronius about to come on at the start of turn 3. And with no war engines left to waver the cavalry on the road, the traffic jam's probably about to resolve itself. Turn 4 starts with surprising turn events as Bale remembers the scenario and flies to claim the objective on the southern edge of the board. Meaning the Goblins now are just holding one objective with those Sharpsticks in the middle of the road. In the centre, the Abyssal Horsemen charge for Sharpsticks while the Molochs go into the badly wounded Bangsticks. The Archfiend charges the right Sharpsticks to protect the flank of the units on the road. Hellquin countercharges the king on chariot, hits only once and fails to wound. Unsurprisingly, the Molochs kill the Bangsticks. Abyssal Riders put more wounds onto the Sharpsticks, but are badly hampered by their phalanx. The Archfiends put some wounds onto the right Sharpsticks, but is also hampered by the phalanx. The Goblin's turn, the king on chariot benefits from not being wounded in the last round of combat with Hellquin, breaks contact to plink 2 wounds onto Bale from his bow. Even though Bale is stealthy, so he's hitting on 5s and then wounding on 5s, 2 wounds, not a bad result, but Bale doesn't really care about that. Sharpsticks go back into the Archfiend and give him some grief. And on the road, the Abyssal Riders are caught in a sharp stick sandwich and are routed. Unfortunately, it's difficult then to reform on the road to keep the enemy off the central objective. The situation at the end of turn 4. It's getting a bit desperate now. The goblins hanging on to that central objective, but only just, and there's a lot of forces coming down the road towards them. Bale's sitting on the objective at the bottom here. So the Abyssals have got 2 of the 3 objectives, and they're probably going to get the 3rd one this round maybe. Turn 5 starts with Bale firing lightning bolts at the king on chariot, but to little effect. The centre of the dice gods smile on the goblins, and the Molochs rack up the wounds on the sharp sticks, but then roll a double 1 nerve test. But insult to injury, the Abyssal Riders flank charging the left sharp stick horde are hindered and only manage to waver them. The goblin defence faltering, the king on chariot charges into Bale to prevent him from claiming that objective. And despite being equipped with the blade of a beast slayer, he can only scratch the brute, which doesn't really help, but at least he's stopping Bale from claiming that objective at the moment. In the centre, the goblins they reform and flail around against any enemy in reach, but to little effect. Situation at the end of turn 5, and the end is here. Bale will probably deal with the Goblin King in this turn, and you can well imagine that the Molochs and the cavalry will defeat what's left of the Goblin Sharpsticks in the centre there to claim that objective as well. Turn 6, and that is what happens. Bale kills the king on chariot. Lots of things charge the Sharpsticks in the centre, and they all die a horrible death. And with the bulk of the Goblin army dead, the Abyssals finally claim all 3 objectives. The only goblins left standing is a horde of Sharpsticks fighting the Archfiend on the right, but they're not close enough to the objective to claim it. So it's victory to the Abyssals on turn 6. So, Battle 6 outcome. This will affect the final battle. As the quicker the Abyssal army captures the objectives, the less time the goblins will have to prepare the defence of the harbour. The Abyssals won on turn 6, which is, if you like, a draw. So there is in fact no benefit to either side in battle 9. Had the Abyssals won in turns 1, 2, 3 or 4, they would have had an extra victory point for controlling the table section on their side of the board. Had the goblins held them up until turn 7, then they would have got an extra victory point for controlling the section on their side of the board. But as it was a draw, there is no impact on the final battle, battle 9. Thoughts on that battle? You need a significant mental shift to play this scenario. The Abyssals need to kill stuff quickly and not worry about their own losses, and goblins have to accept they are going to lose. The goblins, having had a plan of sitting behind their Sharpsticks, ignored that completely, went charging out, which actually worked quite well for them. Could the defensive walls have been placed better? Maybe. The one on the road did quite a lot. The other 2 maybe were as much hampering to the goblins as to the Abyssals. The Sharpsticks did extraordinary work, particularly with their Maw-pups and their charges. For instance, killing the Abyssal Archfiend with a flank charge. But the dice gods were definitely on the side of the goblins. Getting the double 6 to waver the Abyssal Horsemen in the first turn, which held them up, and then getting another high nerve roll to waver them again in the second turn was huge. And then in turn 5, when the Molochs rolled a double 1 nerve check on the badly damaged Goblin Sharpsticks, held them up. Had it not been for that, certainly you would have expected the goblins to have lost by turn 4 probably. So dice gods very definitely on the side of the goblins there. So that's the end of volume 2 of the Broken Wall Islands campaign. Look out for volume 3, which includes the final battle.